Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Lane. I farm and ranch up here in north central Montana uh, with my family. And I have with me today a book. It's called Ramblings from Under the Kievan Rim. It's written by my late Uncle Carl. And it just kind of tells the stories and history of the area. And I just want to share some of the stories with you. And I'll probably do this as a video series because it's pretty good, hefty, long book. It's got lots of unique stories and stuff about his life and the life of the neighbors, and it covers a lot about 1920s and 30s and stuff like that, and the early parts of the book here. And I just want to share some of my family's history and the stories of our area with everybody. I think he started writing this book sometime in the 1990s, I believe it says, and they finally got it published in 2005. This copy, it's been in my family for quite a while, and it's getting pretty rough shape. So this is kind of my way of also documenting the book without having to try and track down other copies. I guess I haven't had very good luck yet. But starts off about his family. His father, Carl Theodore Dolan, was born at Cummings Trail County, North Dakota, on September 16th, 1883, to Peter and Helene Sagan Nielsen Dolan. He died April 12th, 1970, at Shelby in Toole County, Montana. My mother, Eliza Borzen Dolan, was born at Langford, Brown County, South Dakota, on October 11th, 1885. Her parents were Thomas and Gunny Sater Borson. She later died at Chester, Liberty County, Montana, May 12th, 1969. My parents were married at Lumsden, Saskatchewan, Canada. My Borson grandparents had purchased land and started farming operations there when my father went there looking for work. He had sisters that had a cafe in the hometown of Hanley. However, his parents never went to Canada to live. My oldest sister, Gertrude Helene, was born in that area in 1907 and died April 16th, 1915, in Great Falls, Cascade County, Montana. She was always known to the family as Tootsie. My sister, Myrtle Esther, was also born in the Hanley area. The family moved to Montana around 1915. Myrtle went away to high school in Shelby. She stayed with the S.A. Hole family at the Shelmont Hotel and helped with their crippled daughter and helped with the homework for her room and board, housework for her room and board. Myrtle married Sam Potter, which would be great my great grandfather on my grandma's side, in 1927, and Teresa, the baby sister of 5 at the time, said, "I guess I'll have to take old Enneberg then." She moved when she heard Myrtle was getting married. They moved to the Potter Ranch in the Alo area of Toole County, Montana, which is where my family ranch it, and I now also run the ranch over there, at the Alo area of Toole County, Montana. She lived there until her death on November 7th, 1958. She had a daughter, Jean Lucille, my grandma, who married Douglas Gordon, and they had 2 children, Sherry and Thomas, Tom being my dad. My brother Pete was also born in Canada, in the same area, on November 11th, 1913. He was named Thomas Peter, not surprisingly, named after the grandfathers. He spent his life there working on many ranches and as a driller in the Kievan, Montana area, until his disappearance in 1954. He was never heard from that time until his death in Portland, Oregon, on December 2nd, 1989. This was a shock to our family, as we had tried to find him for many years and had never quit wondering. We buried him in Hood River, Oregon, where he had lived and worked for over 34 years. He had been the right-hand man of Japanese orchard man George Watanabe. I came along as the 4th child and was named Carl Theodore Jr. I was born in Cutbank, Glacier County, Montana, on December 11th, 1916. I was born at a maternity home owned by Amelia Parcell. I have lived in around the Kievan area and Cutbank area all my life, and I'm still on the land we moved to when I was around 11 years old. I spent 3.5 years in the U.S. Navy during World War II. I worked on many farms and ranches in the area. I worked for Chris Seward, doing general farm work, and for Bob Miller, a bachelor, and sheepmen at various times. I also worked for Ed Lester one summer farming and did some oil field work on the construction end of the business. I helped John Nagu and Sam Potter lamb, and for Curly Rock thrashing one year. I worked at the Big West oil refinery for some time, and in the April of 1941, I went north of Cut Bank and worked for E.L. Anderson on his farm and ranch. My sister Dolly was born November 4th, 1919. She was given the name of Gertrude Helene, the same as my older sister that had died. This is why we called her Dolly. She was born at home and on the farm we were living on about 7 miles west of Kevin. She went to school in Kevin and at the Rim Rock School, which was close to where we lived. She went there through the 8th grade. She then went to Kevin and lived with the Ed Gordon family, my great-grandfather on my grandpa's side, helping with their children for her board and room while she went to school in Oilmont. After graduating, she went to Dillon and attended the normal school there. She married Edgar Woods from the Sweetgrass Hills area. Dolly and Edgar had 13 children, most of who are scattered around the country, with some still in the Sweetgrass Hills. Teresa Bethea was born November 10, 1922, at home on the old George West homestead. It's now known as the Gallup Place, west of Kevin, with Mrs. L.R. Strange as the midwife. Teresa was always known as to be quite obstinate, although she and I usually got along very well. She went to school at Rimrock School, then to Oilmont, Cut Bank, and Shelby schools. She went to business college in Great Falls, Montana. She worked at Goggins and Penny after completing school. It was in Great Falls where she met and married James Andy Andrews, who was stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base. After his discharge, I moved back to Oklahoma City, which was the general area he had come from. They had 3 daughters that are at various places around the USA. After the death of her husband, she went to live with her daughter, Isla Sue. They have lived several places due to transfers Isla has had with her employment. The youngest and last child of our family was George Henry, born December 7th, 1929, at the home ranch with Dr. N.A. Olson in attendance. He went to ALO school with his niece, Jean Potter. There was no school near home, so at the time he went to live with his sister, Myrtle's family. After leaving school, he stayed home with his mother until he joined the Navy. After he is discharged, he died in an automobile accident in the Kevin area in the 1950s. My great-grandmother, Golina Slowbroughton, died at the Grandma Dolan homestead, which was directly north of the Hanson homesteads. I can remember going with Myrtle and Pete over to Grandma Dolan's to see great-grandma lying in her coffin on the front porch. We had a little dog we called Jip, and he kept trying to jump up to look in the coffin, too. She is buried in a cemetery at the north end of the homestead. My grandfather Dolan is also buried there. This original homestead is now owned by my cousin, Doris Hodges. In the 1980s, her late husband Kenny came with Oregon cedar posts, all turned and beautiful, and put a fence around the graves. Many years before, another cousin, Joe Alsted, had put marble markers there to identify the graves. I later had to take sucker rod and put around Kenny's beautiful fence as the cattle were rubbing it down. The next excerpt is about neighbors here, and just talks about all their neighbors that they had and their little stories that they had with them. Our neighbors in the 1920s were the families of Charlie Kieser, John Nagu, Gus Alsted, Jim Miller, John McDonald, and Earl Gillespie. R.A. Fromke had a store and post office at Alo, a whistle stop on the railroad about 10 miles south of Kevin. And that town is no longer in existence. There's not even a building left there. There's just the old dugouts where they had the general store and a couple barns and other buildings there. That old township is on my family's ranch over there. The local farmers and ranchers got their mail and coal from him also. The Potter Ranch was close to Alo. The Anneberg family had come to the country in the early 1900s from Minnesota and homesteaded close by. The only surviving child, Edwin, still lives there. Anneberg was a widow with 6 children, 4 boys and 2 girls. The 2 other boys were Ted and Ingeman. The one girl, Ida, married August Lindberg, a quite successful farmer who lived up on top of the rim and farmed with his partner, Jake Jacobson. They were known as the Copenhagen twins, and most everyone considered them the best farmers in the whole area. In fact, when I was working for Ed Lester, a neighboring farmer on the North Rim, in 1939, we were setting up an old used windmill. As we were putting it together, something didn't quite fit right. Ed made the remark, "We have to fix it better because August or Jake might see this and think I did a poor job." So you can see they kind of set a standard around here. Ed Lester's sister Julia lived with him and cooked for him. He was a really nice guy. The Lindberghs had 2 boys who still live on the farm. Glenn farms, and Arnie does aerial spraying and is in the airplane mechanic business. Ole Annenberg, the oldest, married Olga Hanel, and they moved in onto the North Rim to the Kaler place. They had several children that are scattered around except for the two of the boys, Dwayne, who has a shop east of Kevin and does oil field equipment work and general repairs. Gary farms the home place where his mother lives. He bought the Chris Seawald farm, which joined his mother's, where he and his family now live. Chris Seawald homesteaded on the North Rim in the early 1900s. I think they came from Washington and had one boy, Dick. Dick married Len Thompson's sister and farmed on the reservation for years. There were also three girls. Rose married a cowboy named Len Thompson. Alice married John Walters, and Lillian married Earl Gillespie, our closest neighbor. The Gillespies moved on to the Davidson Brothers Ranch during the middle 30s. The father and mother, Earl Sr. and Mrs. Gillespie, had three boys and two girls. Bess married Martin Goldrich, and after living other places, finally lived in Cutbank. They had four boys and three girls. Alta Gillespie married John McDonald, and they had four boys and two girls. Darrell, the oldest boy, was drowned in the Gillespie Reservoir. He and my brother Pete were great buddies. I spent a lot of time with the McDonalds, as Jack, the next oldest boy, and I were great pals. Doris died a few years ago. Florence, we see occasionally, lives at Kalispell. Lauren, or Fuzzy as he was called, lives in Wyoming. Marvin lives east of Oilmont. Jack lives at Rawlings, Wyoming, and Jem and I stopped there to see him a few years ago. Alta was a wonderful person. I am sure that she must have gotten tired of me hanging around there. When we got old enough to go on our own, Jack and I used to ride our horses to Cutbank once a year and stay overnight at the Goldricks and have our teeth fixed by Doc Minette, an old-time dentist there. He took our money. He always asked if we had a place to stay and money to eat on. Not many would have worried about that. Lester Gillespie lived on the ranch with his folks. He was an awful hard worker and never married. Bert Gillespie was married, and they had a boy. They had a boy and a girl. They lived at Kalispell for years, but in later years moved back to the Kevin area. Earl Gillespie married Lily Seawald, and she taught school at the Rimrock School for a few years. They had two boys, Bruce, who they called Butch, and Wayne. Our closest neighbors are now Butch and Doreen 1 mile to the east, and Wayne and Roxy 1 mile to the west, which they all still reside there. Coyote Mike used to be a sheep herder and lived in an old shack north of Kevin. He and his hogs slept in the same house. He was the garbage man for Kevin. It appeared that he never changed his clothes. He'd wear 3 pairs of pants with holes in various parts on them, so his pants never had a hole in all 3. Then, when his horse died that carted the garbage cart around town, he used goats. Next little bit here is going to be about the school and going to school in the area. The Rimrock schoolhouse was north of where Jack Monroe now lives, and close to the old Axel Swenson place. Lily Seawald Gillespie taught my sister Teresa for a few years there. This is the same school that Pete, Dolly, Teresa, and I went to for several years. We rode our horses for about 3 miles each way for a while, then found out it was warmer to walk. Pete and I went to school in Kevin, and we either rode double on the horse or took the buggy. Between home and school, we used to see what we thought was a white wild dog. It would take off like a streak of lightning. We talked about it around Kevin, and the word got around to the Ramsey brothers, and they went to look for it. It didn't take them long to decide that it was a white wolf. They gathered their guns, and off they went wolf hunting. It wasn't long until they had Mr. Wolf. They skinned him out, of course, for the hide. They reported that he was about the size of a 300 to 400 pound calf and snow white. And I know back in like the early 20s area, my great grandmother, or might have been great great grandmother, great great grandmother, she wouldn't go out to the bathroom at night to the outhouse because she was afraid the wolves were going to get her, because they were actually pretty plentiful in our area back then. When driving to school, it was an old saddle horse called Brucken. They pulled the buggy, and he wasn't much in favor of this chore. He behaved a lot like Karen's horse Smoky. He was always seeing or hearing strange things, especially on foggy days, especially in the area of the Miller Reservoir, or in the area between the O'Connell Place and the Habits elevators at the south end of Kevin. One time we were angling across by the Miller Reservoir on a weird foggy day, when some sound or something he thought he saw got him running and kicking through the greasewood and sage at, well, I would guess about 30 miles per hour. There's no speedometer, obviously. Anyhow, we got on the line and ran him in a circle until he got winded. It was a rough ride and one to remember. If you have ever crossed that pasture by the Miller Reservoir and know what I mean, the shaves on the old buggy were broken, but we finally got to school. On the way home that night, we took a different road past the Eldon By place, and a lady that was living there at the time came out and helped us wire the shaves up so we could get home. I am thinking that at this time Pete was maybe 10 or 11, and I was 7 or 8. On another such foggy and cold day, we were thinking we would do the same thing again, and about where the Habits elevator is in the O'Connell place, it is rough across there anyway. Brucken was just waiting for the right place to throw a fit, and he did. By this time we were on the outskirts of Kevin, and the fog was pretty soupy. Some dogs started barking, and old Brucken rolled his eyes, laid back his ears, and we were off at top buggy speed. The wheels were bouncing from one greasewood to another, with an occasional kick to keep things interesting. We both got on one line, and thank goodness it didn't break, and neither did the wagon. We ran him in a circle until he was pooped. I think we were probably a little late for school, but in one piece. We never dared tell the folks about these episodes, as Dad never would have believed Brucken would have behaved that way, as he was a pet horse. However, you could tell that he had a Norwegian name. If our mother would have known, she would have never let us drive him to school anymore. Then how would we have gotten to school? I suppose we would have been disappointed if we were unable to go to school. Another time we were driving to school with Brucken, going down the corner gate on the way to the log cabin pasture. It was towards spring and water had been flooding, then had turned cold and was now solid ice. I opened the gate and Pete managed to coax Brucken onto the ice about 10 feet, and there he stood, petrified and afraid to move, as the ice was as slick as glass. After about a half an hour, Jim Miller and his two boys, Robert and Wallace, happened along. Jim, who talked pretty loud, says, "We'll fix him." So they unhitched the buggy and pushed it away from the horse. Then Jim grabbed the halter and rope with a jerk, spun Brucken around, and they dragged him off the ice. Needless to say, we went home with no school that day. A few years ago, I asked Robert Miller if he remembered the episode, and he said he did, and it wasn't one that he'd soon forget. I used to sometimes hitch a ride to school with old Charlie Keener through the same water in the Model T Ford. Early in the mornings, it was usually frozen, and he would usually take an old fence post, break the ice, and we got through it, even though the water was about 2 feet deep in the ditch. Those old Model Ts with the 30 by 3.5-inch tires had lots of clearance, and the engine and fan set up high. We always made it one way or another. In 1929 to 30, I got out of school through the 8th grade, and started working at various ranch jobs around the country. In 1931, Dola Nash Taft was teaching and got sick and had to quit. There was no teachers, so I left school and started lambing. Later, after the Pleasant Valley School was out, they got old Lady Cummings to finish the term, but I didn't go back. Our teachers at the school were Miss Hundley, Miss Anderson, and Dola Nash later. She became Taft after she got married. She came from Redstone, Montana. As there was no school handy to her parents' farm, she brought her two brothers, Orville and Willard, with her to attend school here. She now lives at Conrad and puts on puppet shows, and we see her occasionally. Next one's rattlesnakes here. First rattlesnake I ever saw was at the West Place. One day my mother was hanging clothes on the line, and we kids were playing close by when we heard this buzzing noise and saw the snake sliding through the grass with its tongue running in and out. Nobody had to tell us what it was. We took for the timber instantly, while my mother got a club and killed Mr. Snake. This is rattlesnake country. Around the rims there are numerous snake dens where the snakes den up in the winter. Through the summer, when the weather is warm, they travel across the prairie, going several miles. The distance traveled depending on the length and of the warmth of weather. When the weather starts to cool, they head back to their dens for the winter. Snakes live mostly on mice and gophers, so they do quite a lot of good. Usually they will head away from you if they can, but if you step on one, he's going to bite you. When we first moved up to this rim country in 1927, we used to cut hay in these coulees. We would rake it, pitch it on hay rack, and then we kids would get in the load and start tramping it down to get one more in the load. Then we would haul it and unload it in the barn with forks. Once in a while, you'd get a forkful of hay for the horses, and a snake would drop out. Don't know how we never got bit. Many snakes were killed on the doorstep into the house. One night we were sitting in the house after dark with the lights on. My sister Teresa suddenly said, "There's a rattlesnake under that cabinet." We didn't believe her at first, but when we checked, sure enough, he was about a foot and a half long. How he got in with no one could figure out, as he had to climb 2 steps, each about a foot high, and there was a screen door on the house. Someone must not have closed it properly for a couple of minutes. I think that's where we'll end for today, and if this is a popular enough video, I'll probably go through the rest of the book a little bit. There's next chapter's going to be titled "Bootleggers" and how they used to move cases of liquor across the Montana here, heading south towards Great Falls and area, and they would still it out here, and they'd also bring it down out of Canada. But I hope everybody enjoys the video, and comment if you know any of the names that I've read out, if you know the area, if you want to hear more, just reach out and leave a comment, like, subscribe, and yeah, appreciate the likes and follows. Have a good one.